In the previous video, we were able to build the home screen for our app, and we built all the components to display the products over here. In this part, we'll be moving to the next screen, which will be the details screen. That is this screen here that comes after clicking on any of the products on the home page. So that'll be our focus in this part. So to start this, we'll first create a component for the screen, which we'll call details. So that will be under our screens directory. We'll create a new file, which we'll call details. Now inside this details screen, we'll create our details component. So in this function, we'll start by just returning the fragment and then export it as the default of the file. Now we need to register this details screen as part of the home stack here. So visit our navigators directory inside the home stack, and then we import the details screen. But before we do that, let's export the details screen in the index file under screens. So we import details and then export it once again. And then back in our home stack, we can then import the details screen. So we can add it to the home import here. And then below the home screen, we can copy and paste this. And then we change this to the details route. For the title of the screen, we'll set it to an empty string for now. We'll add a couple of properties in a bit. With this done, at the top over here, we'll set an initial route name. And we'll set it to the details screen. We are setting this so that we can see the work that we are doing on the details screen. Once we have that, we can refresh the app here. So I can bring the context menu. And then I'll reload the app so that we can see the content of the details screen. For now, it should be a blank screen. Good, like so. So we are currently on the details screen. Once we have this, we can go back to the details screen like so. Now, if you have a look at our target screen, we can see that the details page is divided into two main sections. We have a top section which ends at the bottom of the image, and also a bottom section where we have the description. So at the very top, see that we have the name of the product. So we will start working on that. The first component we'll be using is our scrollable main container. So we import our scrollable main container from the components. In addition to this, we also need our styled text. And then from React Native, we will need the view. So at the top, you can import the view from React Native. Over here in the return, we return our scrollable main container, and inside this we'll have our view, and inside this view we'll have our styled text. Now remember that we created a function in the data file. So inside config, we have the data file. Then we have a function getWineData, which returns the products that we want to display. So over here on the details page, we'll call this function, and after everything is done, we'll receive a particular ID when moving to the details screen so that we can display that particular product. Now for the start, we'll choose a random ID so that we can get the screen set up. And after that, we can alter it to display the appropriate data. So at the top, we import getWineData from our config and data file. And then inside the details component, we declare the particular wine that we want. So we set the one ID. For that, let's use a second one. And then once we have this, we will have the fetched wine. And for now, to be the getWineData. And then we pass the wine ID like so. So now this is what we'll be working with. So over here in the view, inside the style text, we'll be displaying the name of the product. So we'll say fetchedWine.name. Now what is returned from the get wine data here is an array. So we target the very first element. Once we do that, we should see the name of our product. Now for styling the page, let's bring in the style sheet from React Native as well. So in addition to the view, we bring in the style sheet. And then below the component, we create our styles. That will be style sheet.create. For the scrollable main container, we'll pass it a style through the content container style. And this will be the container style rule. For the first view in the component, we'll style it and the styles will be called top section. And then for the name on the page, first of all, you want to make it big. And then we'll add some additional styles through styles.name. For the container style, all we'll do here to set some padding at the bottom of 25. Now because this page will be scrolling, we want to set the padding at the bottom so that the final part of the page can be seen. Next, for the top section, we'll first set a padding horizontal of 25 pixels. Also, we'll set some padding at the bottom of the same value. And then want to set a background color just for the top section. So to do that, we'll bring in our colors from our theme file. So bring colors from our theme file like so. And then we'll set it to our secondary color. Now with this done, if you look at the image, we see that the top section has slightly rounded corners at the bottom. I hope you can see it. Yes, the corners are rounded. So to set those two properties, we'll set border bottom right radius to 15 and do the same for border bottom left radius. This should curve the corners of the bottom section over here. Lastly, for the name, we want to give it a margin at the bottom of 30. And then we'll increase the size. So set a font size of 30 as well, so that we can match what we have on our screen here. Now, since we set the font size here, meaning we don't need this big property, but rather we can just use the bold to keep the text boldened. Now for the next details on the page, that is the property and value that we have over here, we'll create a simple component for it. So in our components directory and under text, we'll create a new component which we'll call product info. Over here, we'll create the component. And then at the bottom, we export as the default product info. Then once again, inside the index file under components, we import the product info and then export it once again. Now inside the detail screen, we can import our product info in addition to the style text here. So we have the product info, and this will be used just below the name we have over here. So we'll have product info. And for how we'll be designing the component, it will take a label property. And the first label we have in our image is the alcohol. So we'll set it to alcohol. And then the value will also come from the fetched wine data we have over here. So we can copy this and paste it here. and then the value will be the alcohol. And then we can concatenate the percentage to it. Now let's get it to display, and then we can add some external styling here. Here we'll need the view from React Native. So import the view component once again from React Native. And also we bring in our styled text. So import styled text. Then also we need our colors. So import the colors from the theme file. The first component we return is the view. And inside this, we'll have a styled text. This will be for the label. So we destructure that from the properties. So we'll have the label and then the children. So we'll put the first label in the styled text. And then below this, we'll have another styled text. This time around for the children. For the label, we first want it to be bold. And then we'll style it a bit by first setting the color to our accent color. Then we'll lighten it a bit. Also, we'll add a margin at the bottom of 5 pixels. Now, if we receive any other styling to this component here, we can destructure that as well and then pass it to the view. So this completes our simple component. Once we have this, we can go back to the details and then we use the product info here a couple more times. So we copy and paste this 3 more times. The next one is volume. Then we change the value here to volume. And then get rid of this percentage here. And then year. And then finally origin. Now to have some spacing between them, let's add the style property. And we'll be using styles.info. So I can copy this style here and paste it on all of them. And over here in the styling, we'll create the info style rule. And then all we'll do is to set the margin at the bottom to 15 pixels. Now after the details we have here, you see that we have the price of the product. For this, we'll just use the style text. So we can copy the style text for the name, then paste it below the last product info. This time around, we can get rid of the style here and also change this to the big text. And then for the value, we'll use the currency and then go ahead to concatenate it with the price. So we'll add the fetch wine dot price to complete our pricing. Now after the price, we have a small heart button here for liking the product. So this will use the touchable opacity to create a very simple component. So we import touchable opacity here like so. And then the icon we'll be using will come from Ant Design. So we import Ant Design from at Expo vector icons. And then below the style text here, we render the touchable opacity. Then inside this, we'll have the Ant Design. The name of the icon will be Hearts O. And I'll give it a size of 27. And then for the color, we'll set it to our tertiary color. And then we'll lighten it a bit. Now to see what's happening, we can reload the app. Now on the button we'll need some styling. So we'll set the style property to styles.heart. Then over here we'll handle the style for heart. First of all, we change the background color. We're using our primary color. And then we'll set the position to absolute. And then we'll give it a bottom property of -20. This should bring it down here. And then we'll set the right property to 50%. This should bring it to the middle of our page. Now we'll give it a padding of 10 pixels. Then a border radius of 50 to make it a circle around it. And then we'll give it a border width of 2. Then we can set the border color. To our secondary color. Now to keep this always at the top of all the other components, we'll set a Z index. And we'll give it a value of 1. Once we are done with this, we can move to the image at the right side of the page. So for this, we bring in the image components from React Native. Then we render this below our touchable opacity here. So the image, and then the source will be from our fetched wine.image. To make this nice and well positioned, we pass the style, which we'll call styles.image. Then down here, we'll handle the style just below the heart here. For this as well, we'll position it to be absolute. Then we'll give it a height of 90%. Also give it a width of 100%. Now set the resize mode to contain so that we can have the full view of the image. Then we'll set the right property to -95 pixels. And then we set the top to 90 pixels. Now if we go back to our screen, we see that we're almost done with the top section of the page. With the exception of the header at the top here, we should match the color of the top section. So we go back to our home stack. And then in the options property, we'll pass a header style. And then over here, we'll set a background color to our secondary color. Now, once we've done that, because we are overwriting the header style in the screen component, on some devices, you will see the default styling of the header back again. So to avoid this, we can add all the initial styling that we did for our header. So we copy from the border bottom width to the shadow opacity, and then paste it below here. This should give us a clean look from our header to the content on the page. Now with the top section done, we'll move to the bottom section of the page. To do this, we'll use the view to create the section. So below the top section view, create another view for the bottom section. Here we'll first use the product info component we created to display the description. So we copy the fetched wine data here. Then replace the image here with description. And then we'll set the label to description as well. Now below the description will be the button to add to the cart. So we bring in our styled button. Then we render it below this. And then the content will be add to cart. And then we'll give it an icon of shopping cart. The shopping cart shouldn't be hyphenated. And now we have our icon for adding to the cart. Now we start the bottom section. Starting by giving it a padding horizontal of 25 pixels. And also a padding at the top of same value, 25 pixels. Now the description here should also have the styles.info. So we can copy the style here and then apply it to the description like so. This should give us a space between the description and then the button. With what we have now, the next thing we want to add is an alternate component to display when the item has been added to the cart. So if you have a look at our screens here, when an item is added to the cart, we have a remove button and then a cart counter. So let's implement this look in our application. Now to help us to monitor when to display this button or the remove button, let's create a state for it. So we bring in the useState hook from React. We import the useState hook from React. And at the top, we create a state which we'll call added to cart. Then we have a set added to cart. The actual initial value will be false, but now since we want to hide the add to cart button and then work on the remove, we'll set this to true. So over here, let's wrap this whole button section in a view. And at the top, we'll check if the product has not been added to the cart. So if the product has not been added to the cart, that is when we return the add to cart button. So like so, we can wrap it with the ending part of the curly braces. And then at the bottom, if it has already been added to the cart, that is when we return what we are about to work on. So in this case, we'll put a fragment. Inside this, we'll first have a button similar to the styled button here. Now this time around, it will say remove. And then the icon will be the delete icon. In addition to this will be the cart counter that we are here to work on. So for now, for the remove button, we'll style the button itself. So we'll call the style remove button. And also for the text of the button, we'll style it. So we can copy and paste this and change this to text style. And the style itself will be called remove button text. And for the view which wraps the button, also give it a style of cart row. That is the row that deals with adding to the cart and removing from the cart. So at the bottom, first style our cart row, giving it a flex direction of row, then a margin at the top of 10. Then we justify the content to have a space between them. Then for the remove button, we'll give it a width of 47%. Then we'll give it a background color of secondary. Now for the text, we'll set the color to our tertiary color. And then we'll add CC to lighten it a bit. Now for the counter, we'll go to our components, and under inputs, we'll create a new component which we'll call cat counter. So over here, we'll create our function component. And then we can export as the default. Now, as usual, inside the index file under component, we import the cat counter and then export it once again. And then we go to the details page and import our cat counter. So right here, we add it to our start button. Then we can render it just below the remove button. Now this cat counter will expect a few more properties, but in this episode, all we are focusing on is the looks. So we'll work on that in the future episodes. So back in the cat counter here, we'll start by importing the view from React Native. In addition to the view, we'll need the touchable opacity and then the style sheet from React Native. Now, if you look at our screens, we have two buttons, one on each end of the counter and then a text in the middle. This text here will be an input field that the user can press to enter the text manually. So back here, we'll first return the view. And inside this, we'll have touchable opacity twice. Now in between this will be the input. So we bring in our styled text input. So we import that like so, and then render it. Now for the content of the button, we'll be using an icon from Ant Design. So we import Ant Design from Expo Vector Icons. And also we need our colors. So we import our colors from the theme file. Once we have this, in the touchable opacity, render the Ant Design. The name of the icon we'll be using is -circle. Then we'll give it a size of 30. And then for the color, we'll set it to our tertiary color. This will be the same for the other button. So we copy and paste, and this time around, we'll change the name to +circle. Now focusing on the styling, the first view here will have a style of container. And then if we receive any additional styles, it will go to it. So over here in the props with the structure style, and then convert this view style to an array. And then we add the style to it. For the touchable opacity, we'll give it a style of button. So we copy the styles.container here. And then we can paste it and change the style to styles.button. And then for the inputs, we'll have an input style for it. So change the style to input. Then for the time being, let's set it to have a value of 1. And then the last button to have the same style as the first one. After this, we can create our style sheet here. And then we can start with the container style rule. The first thing we are doing here is to set the flex direction to row. Now the app is still saying styles doesn't exist. So let's reload it to see if we can get rid of it. Once we do that, we should see the output of our work. Now after the flex direction of row, we'll give it a height of 60 pixels. Then we align the items in it to the center. Also, we justify the content to have a space around it. Then we give it a background color of our secondary color. Now we'll give it a border radius of 15 and then a width of 100%. Now the width property has messed up the whole look here, but I'll fix it on the details page. The next style on our hand is the button style. For the button, we'll give it a width of 40, a height of 40. Then we'll justify the content to the center. Then align the items to the center as well. Now we style the input. For this, we'll give it a width of 50. And to see properly what is happening here, let's go to the details page and then add the style that we wanted to add. So over here, we set a style and we'll call this cat counter. Like so. Then over here, all we'll do is set the width property to a value similar to the button for removing. So this one is also 47%. And now we should see the full view of the cat counter. Now back on the cat counter, after setting the width, we'll give it a font size of 20. Set a padding at the left of 1, then padding at the right of 1 as well. And also we'll align the text to the center. Now give it a font weight of bold. Once we do that, we have the look of our cat counter, exactly as it is on the page that we have here. Now, if you've noticed, the button for the minus is grayed out over here, meaning the counter cannot go less than 1. This was something we'll add in the coming episodes. Once we have this, we can go back to the details page. Now we are done with this section for alternating the buttons. And actually, the item has not been added to the cart. So we set the initial value of added to cart to false, so that we can have our add to cart button back. Now at this point, we want to set up navigation to this page when a product is pressed on, while displaying the actual details of that particular product. Now typically, for a fully functional app, on the details page, you have a function that fetches the data for the product. So over here, we want to create a similar function. This function will be called fetch wine details. And this will usually make a call to an API, so to have a try catch block. And for now, in case of an error, we want to send that as a warning to the console. Now in this function is where we'll be making the fetch for the data. So at the top here, inside the try block, we'll be having the wine data. And in our case, we will get it by calling the get wine data over here. So we can copy the statement here and then paste it. After this, we want to store the received data in a variable which will make it accessible to the page. So for this, let's convert our fetched wine here to a state. So we can wrap this in the brackets and then add a set fetched wine. Then over here, we convert this to use state. So after getting the wine here, we'll call set fetched wine and then we'll pass the wine data. Now this function here needs to be called every time the page is visited. And to enable us to do that, we'll make use of the use effect hook. Then below the function, we implement the use effect hook, pass a function to it, and then an empty array. Then inside here, we'll call fetch wine details. Now with this done, the last thing that needs to be updated is the ID of the product we are fetching. So to do that, we'll now be getting the ID from the route parameters. So from the props of the component, we'll take in the route. And then we'll change the ID from a static number to route.params.id. Now let's go back to the stack for our screen, that is the home stack. Now over here, our first screen is no longer the details screen because we are done working on it. So we'll change this from details to home screen. Once we do that, we can refresh the app and this should take us to the home page once it's done. Now we need to set up the navigation from these components to the detail screen. These components can be found under cards under the components directory. So starting with the display card, this will be handled in the handle on press function here. Whoa, I didn't realize that we made a typo, so we can correct it now that we've seen it. So it's handle on press. And over here, we'll need the use navigation hook from React navigation. So at the top, we import use navigation from React navigation native. Then at the start of the component, we'll declare navigation and call the use navigation hook. Now to move to the details page, we'll place this here with navigation.navigate. The screen we want is the details screen. Then we pass an object containing the ID. This will be quite similar on the product card page. So we can copy all these. And then on the product card page, we paste it here. So I realized we did the same typo over here. So the value of the on press will be corrected as well to handle on press. Then at the top, we import the use navigation hook from React navigation native. And that's just about it. So now if I press on a card, it takes me to the detail screen of the product. Then if I check another product, it takes me to the detail screen again and updated the content. Now for the other cards, if we press on any of them, it also takes us to the detail screen with the appropriate data. So that's about it for the work today. I'll put the link to what we've done today in the description so you can check it out. We'll continue in the next part.